is the South China Sea, and we're watching the U.S. and Filipino militaries conduct live-fire exercises. It's part of the largest ever combined combat exercises between the U.S. military and the armed forces of the Philippines.
Fire in the hole!
For 125 years, the Philippines has been crucial to U.S. interests in the Pacific. And now, amid rising tensions with China, the Philippines has agreed to let more American troops into the country.
If that war comes, we're going to be prepared to execute it if we have to.
Diba, nasa kabilang panig sila ng daigdig eh. Diba? Anong pakialam nila dapat dito? Wala sila dapat pakialam dito.
I traveled here.
All right, we're getting on this boat.
To learn what a surge of U.S. troops means for the lives of Filipinos.
Ito ay isang gera hindi na matutupad sa US. Ito po ay isang gera na hindi mangyayari dito sa China. Ang gera pong ito ay mangyayari sa Pilipinas.
And how the effects of U.S. colonization are still reverberating today.
Patriot missile launch is a very loud thing, loud and forceful.
Hopefully, you'll never forget hearing the sound of a Patriot missile going off. Patriot missiles are big, they can be expensive, but they're absolutely lethal.
I'm at a naval base on the South China Sea at this year's Balakatan, the annual combined military exercises between the U.S. and the Philippines. Balakatan means shoulder to shoulder in Tagalog, and the 2-week-long training is meant to strengthen ties between the longtime allies. More than 12,000 American troops are in the country for this year's exercises, which include drills like shooting down target drones over the South China Sea.
You can tell folks are pretty proud of the results of their hard work and what they got to do today.
But the star of today's exercise is this, the Patriot, the Army's most advanced air defense system, designed to shoot down enemy missiles. Today was the first time it was ever fired in the Philippines.
It's absolutely amazing that we've done it. Just the physical act of doing it itself is a tremendous readiness benefit.
I hear the word preparedness and readiness a lot. What are you guys getting ready for?
Well, you know, our job as soldiers is to be prepared to fight and win our nation's wars if required to do so.
This year's Balakatan is happening amid rising tensions between the U.S. and China as the two superpowers vie for dominance in the Pacific. There are basically two things the U.S. says it's worried about when it comes to China in the Pacific. First, there's China's sweeping claims over the South China Sea, parts of which Filipinos call the West Philippine Sea. It's a vast, important waterway that's rich in oil, gas, and fisheries. For years, China has been entering waters claimed by the Philippines. The U.S. says it's prepared to come to its allies' defense.
The United States remains ironclad in our commitment to the defense of the Philippines, including the South China Sea.
And then there's Taiwan, the nearby island that has been independently governed for decades, despite China's claim to it. China has warned it will treat any moves by the Taiwanese to claim independence as grounds for an invasion. The U.S. officially recognizes Taiwan as part of China. But despite that, President Biden has said the U.S. would come to Taiwan's defense.
U.S. forces, U.S. men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion.
Yes.
Against the backdrop of all this, and just a few weeks before the combined exercises, the Philippines announced it will allow the U.S. military to expand its footprint. That means there could soon be the largest number of American troops here in 30 years.
Ginagawa lamang natin ay patuloy natin na pinapatibay natin ang depensa ng ating teritoryo, ang pagdepensa ng Republika.
It's an expansion of an existing mutual defense treaty from 2014 known as EDCA. EDCA initially granted American troops access to these 5 Philippine bases. Now, the U.S. will have access to 4 more bases, conveniently, mostly located facing either Taiwan or the South China Sea. Chinese leaders see this and other recent actions by the U.S. as provocation.
如果美方不踩刹车，继续沿着错误的道路狂飙下去，脱轨翻车，陷入对抗冲突。
What message do you think these exercises and firing a Patriot missile, what message do you think this is sending to China?
Regardless if it's China or others, I hope that this demonstrates that we are training, we are prepared to operate with a range of partners and allies. If called to do so, we're going to send Patriot missiles downrange, and we're going to do it at the direction of others.
Since we returned from the Philippines, the U.S. and China have engaged in high-level talks in an attempt to stabilize ties. But the military told us that doesn't change their readiness plans. Another first for Balikatan was this: the bombing and sinking of a mock enemy ship in the South China Sea, a spectacle recorded on military surveillance drone.
Good hit.
On the same day, I traveled 50 miles up the coast of where this bombing was happening to meet with locals who oppose such war games.
They are not welcome here. This is our country. This is not just a battlefield for practice, for wars.
I'm on a boat with a group of local Filipino fisher folk who are protesting the increased U.S. military presence here in the Philippines, saying it's directly impacting their livelihood.
They've been banned from fishing in the sea for several days during Balikatan, a significant setback considering fisher folk are the poorest segment of Philippine society.
Ang aming pagtutol ay hindi lang naman sa Balikatan, kung hindi yung pinagmumula ng Balikatan. Dapat ang EDCA ay i-review o kaya naman ay abolish na dahil hindi naman ito tugon sa kahirapan, sa krisis ng mangingisda, sa krisis ng Pilipinas.
But while these military drills are a temporary setback for the fisher folk, it's estimated that over the last few years, some have lost 70% of their income due to not being able to fish because of consistent Chinese intrusion into their waters.
Kung sa aming mga mangingisda, ang kagyat naming problema, yung panggigipit sa amin ng mga Chino.
In that sense, do you feel like the U.S. military being here is protecting you from China?
No, ang US ang magiging dahilan para lalo kaming gipitin ng China. Kasi kapag na-trigger ang isa't isa sa kanila, ang Pilipinas ang madadamay. Madudurog po ang Pilipinas, madudurog ang buhay ng mamamayang Pilipino, masisira ang ating kalikasan.
Our sovereignty, our freedom, our democracy, our lives, our natural resources are affected by all this.
But recent surveys show that actually, a majority of Filipinos do side with the U.S. over China, a sentiment we repeatedly heard from people throughout the country.
I want U.S. military here in the Philippines.
The U.S. military has historically poured millions into the local economy and provided tens of thousands of jobs. That's significant in a country where almost 1/5 of the population lives under the poverty threshold.
Philippines-U.S. relationship, it's good.
For the past centuries, it's the United States that's been there for us.
But let's unpack that. Because many Filipinos, like those who were protesting outside the country's Department of National Defense the day Balikatan started, say the U.S. has historically exploited the Philippines.
Kasi ayaw namin na ma-sweep na lang under the rug. In all but name, the Philippines is a neo-colony of the United States.
In 1898, the Philippines became one of the first U.S. colonies after being purchased from Spain for $20 million following the Spanish-American War. The U.S. wanted the archipelago nation for its natural resources and strategic location in the Pacific. The U.S. had promised the Philippines its freedom in exchange for helping them defeat Spain, but the U.S. broke that promise and instead occupied the islands and waged a brutal war that killed an estimated 200,000 Filipino civilians. What came next was what President William McKinley called benevolent assimilation. American school teachers were sent en masse to the Philippines and set up a public school system that taught English and American history. In 1946, after almost 50 years, the Philippines gained its independence. But with freedom came a caveat, that the U.S. could continue to station its military there rent-free. Throughout the 20th century, the U.S. military used the Philippines as a launching pad to conflicts like the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Subic Bay Naval Station and Clark Air Base became two of the largest American overseas military bases. They also became the sites of untold environmental tragedies and seedy red light districts that contributed to the abuse of Filipino women.
We have seen and have heard about the stories of women who have been raped and murdered because of American soldiers who want to experience pleasure after their work.
By 1991, anti-U.S. protests had ramped up, and the Philippine Senate voted not to renew the U.S. military's lease, shutting down the bases. But various treaties signed by the two countries in later years kept the U.S. presence alive, but at a fraction of its former size. American troops today train at a handful of bases